Okay, this is December the 7th. This is day 9 of Ishtar's Odyssey. This chapter is called The Debate. Ishtar felt as if he were looking into the face of a cobra again. Everyone was still. Everyone was staring at him. Remember, he had just said that it was ridiculous to believe that there was only one God in front of all of their guests that they were hosting with their caravan. He instantly knew he'd done a terrible thing, but it took several moments before he knew how to fix it. Salamar was about to say something when finally Ishtar's training took over. "Your Majesty," Ishtar said, bowing his head to the sheik, "I beg your forgiveness. My remark was rude and insulting. Not only did I speak when only my elders should be speaking, but I spoke unkind words in an unkind manner to another in his own tent. I have shamed my father, my teachers, and my people, and I beg your pardon." Ishtar bowed his head low to the ground and waited. There was many long moments of silence as the sheik stared, a piece of meat halfway in his mouth. Finally, he raised one hand and the swords withdrew, and then he spoke. "And why do you call the idea of only one God ridiculous?" he asked. Ishtar raised his head slowly, then looked at his father. "The sheik has asked you a question directly," Salamar said. "You may answer directly." Ishtar swallowed, looked around the dinner table, and felt beads of sweat rolling down his neck. He coughed, cleared his throat, then finally spoke as his tutors had taught him to speak. "I offer as evidence, O wise one, the Greeks, the Romans, and your own Chalans. Are not they the greatest civilizations in all the history of the world? Do they not each attest to the fact that it takes many gods to rule the complex societies in which we live?" For another 10 minutes, Ishtar gave a speech that impressed even his father. Drawing on his lessons in history, culture, politics, and religion, he wove together facts and ideas into an intricate argument. Everyone started eating again as Ishtar spoke. When Ishtar finished, the sheik nodded his head in understanding. "I forgive your uncultured outburst as merely the uncontrolled emotions of a small boy," he said. "But you have made amends for your error as an educated man would, and I congratulate your father and your teachers for your fine education." Ishtar's whole body relaxed. He felt like he could breathe again. "But," said the sheik, "I disagree with your arguments. As well formed and stated as they were, like many of your own Persian people, I am a follower of Zoroaster, who walked these very sands 1,000 years ago. Zoroaster wrote clearly of the one true God who..." 20 minutes later, the sheik finished his own arguments. Ishtar didn't agree at all, but by now his training in protocol and etiquette had returned to his thinking. "I bow to your wise and thoughtful arguments," he said. The sheik smiled. "You are indeed well trained, for I suspect my comments have not changed your mind in the least." Ishtar wisely remained silent. "Let us end this discussion as friends, and as a friend I offer you this gift." He clapped twice, clap, clap, and servants placed a long straight sack tied at both ends in Ishtar's hands. "A rare and magical invention from deep in China," the sheik said, and everyone applauded generously. Ishtar knew better than to open the gift in front of the giver, so he just bowed again and thanked the sheik. With his belly full of meat, cheese, bread, and olives, Ishtar headed back to his tent with Kazim at his side. Most people were still awake, and many danced and sang around their fires. Once they reached the tent, which had been stitched together so well that it was hard to see where Kazim's sword had sliced it open, Ishtar waited this time while his bodyguard inspected the interior. Kazim was satisfied that it was safe, but Ishtar wasn't so sure. It was dark in there. What if Kazim missed something? Even while he was thinking this, Kazim had already grabbed a nearby torch and held it so Ishtar could see that no danger lurked inside. "I am simply going to put my gift in the tent," Ishtar said. "Then you and I will stay up all night with the others dancing and singing." Yes, my young master, Kazim said, but he didn't sound very sincere. The body of the snake was gone, and of course, but Ishtar was surprised that there wasn't even the hint of blood on the rugs and blankets. He tucked the gift into the space where the tent met the sand and turned to go. Then he saw his pillow and thought how good it would feel to lie down for just a moment. Kazim, he said through the flap, I will rest just a moment before we go to play. Very good, Kazim said. It had been many hours since Ishtar's head had felt the cool silk and soft stuffing of the pillow, and the blankets that had felt scratchy the first night now seemed so plump and soft under his body that he coiled into a ball. He thought that the star they were expecting to guide them, and wondered how such a tiny little light could lead this entire caravan on such a long journey. His eyes fell shut of their own free will, and within moments, he was sound asleep. Kazim, Ishtar shouted, shading his eyes from the sun. You didn't wake me. Oh, but I tried, my young master. They were standing outside Ishtar's tent the next morning, Ishtar still framed by the door flap. He suspected that Kazim hadn't really tried very hard, but he had no proof. Very well. Shall we go to my father's tent for breakfast? On the way, he saw that most of the caravan was sleeping, but some were over at the sheik's train, talking and shopping. Uncle Jodhpur had brought a dozen wives on the trip, and Ishtar saw them buying perfumes and silks. It was a trader's caravan and carried jasmine and sugar, oil, amber, and peacock feathers. Shalimar greeted his son and told him what a fine performance he had the evening before. The sheik had sent some leftover meat and cheese to Shalimar's tent, and now all three sat and ate. Kazim, Shalimar said, I believe this would be a good day to begin Ishtar's training. Ishtar looked from his father to his bodyguard. Oh, what training? Kazim is going to train you in the ways of the warrior, Shalimar explained. Persian men on horseback are the most fearsome and feared warriors in the world. It is one reason the Romans do not wish to go to war with us. As a prince, you must learn the ways of horse battle. If there was one thing Ishtar feared more than camels, it was horses. But horses are so fast, he wailed. Which is why they make excellent mounts for battle, Shalimar answered. Ishtar knew there was no use arguing. If he'd learned one thing on this trip, it was that he had absolutely no say in what happened to him. Yes, father, he said, slumping into a pout. But before your lessons begin, you may open your gift from the sheik. Oh, said Ishtar, I forgot all about it. A few minutes later, he was back at his tent unrolling the gift. The package contained a patchwork of colorful silk sewn together, some sticks, and a ball of string. Most odd, Kazim commented. It looks like a tent too small to hold up even a chicken. Ishtar frowned as he turned it this way and that to see every side, and suddenly he gasped. I know what it is, he shouted. What? Asked Kazim. But Ishtar didn't answer. Instead, he ran out of the tent to the outer edge of the caravan. What is the thing? Kazim asked. Ishtar crossed the two sticks, tied them together, and attached the silk to the ends. When he finished, he held up a diamond-shaped piece of silk, stretched it on the wooden frame. There, you see? Kazim shook his head slowly. Ishtar sighed and wagged his head. Oh, Kazim, you're so old. You do not understand modern technology. It's a kite. I've heard about these from the traders who visit. What does it do? Kazim asked. It flies. Kazim looked doubtful, but a few minutes later, Ishtar had the kite in the air. Kazim gasped as he watched the wind carry the kite high above the palm trees. This is most amazing, he said. After the wind died down and Ishtar retrieved his kite and stored it back into his tent, Kazim introduced Ishtar to a horse twice his size. Ishtar learned how to sit in the saddle and steer the horse, and after that introduction, he was introduced to sword fighting, and after that, an introduction to shooting a bow and arrow. We'll work a little each day, and by the time we return home, you will be a great warrior, Kazim said. As the sun set and the camp came alive, millet was passed about, and the camels were loaded amidst their usual complaining. Ishtar watched the darkening sky, then shouted and pointed as the star appeared, and the caravan followed it away from the oasis and out into the empty desert. Ishtar was amazed at how much faster the camels moved in the cool air of the night. I believe I will name him Musa, Ishtar said as he and Kazim walked next to the camel train. Name who? My camel, of course. It is strange to name an animal, Kazim said. Animals are for work, not friendship. I think they can be for both, Ishtar answered. He has been good to me, this camel. He never complains when I climb on him, and he no longer stinks. Kazim sighed. Well, Musa means companion, so if you're going to name a camel, I guess that's a good name. Ahead of them, Ishtar saw that all the people were mounting their camels instead of walking, as if this were the heat of the afternoon. Snakes and scorpions live in the night, Kazim explained. On moonless nights, they like it best. He lifted Ishtar up on Musa, then climbed aboard his own camel. Ishtar saw 3 men on horseback emerge from the dark, then realized that the one in the lead was his father. Greetings, my son. Salamar turned his animal and fell into step alongside Ishtar. And so we begin the difficult journey in the night. It is not so difficult from the back of a camel, Ishtar answered. Salamar smiled and hesitantly said, Ishtar, there is something I must tell you. Ishtar thought his father looked worried, and that sent a fear like the cobra sneaking in his tent again up his body. I must tell you, my son, a most dreadful event. That's the end of today's. Here's the conclusion. Ishtar lived in a time and a place where some people believed there are many gods. It was very common for people to have gods for everything. The sun, moon, love, war, protection, snakes, all kinds of things. Often these gods were represented by little statues that people carried with them. People believed in these gods because they just didn't know any better. That's why it's important for us to meet and learn about and understand the one true God for ourselves. We can't believe just because someone else does. We must come to know him as our own personal friend and our own personal Savior. Jesus was born just for that reason. As both God and man, he knows what we're feeling and what we need. The stories of him in Scripture give people a way to know him and love him and have a friendship with him. And that is awesome. And that's what Christmas is all about. I'll see you tomorrow.